The Harley hit a pothole at 50 and went down sideways. Hank Garrison slid 6 feet across wet asphalt. 62 years old, president patch on his vest. None of that mattered now. He crawled to the bike, rain hammering his back. The front tire was shredded. He kicked it again, then dropped to his knees on Route 9 and pressed his forehead against the gas tank because 40 miles north, his brother was dying and he had no way to get there. 2 cars passed, neither stopped. The drivers saw the vest, the tattoos the size of him, and kept going. Then a third set of headlights slowed. A woman stepped out into the rain, 34, school blouse soaked in seconds. Her mother was home alone, waiting for insulin that was already late. She walked straight to the bike, knelt down and said,
"Foreign fire pin. I can fix this."
She had no idea that those 4 words were about to change everything. Have you ever watched karma deliver a receipt so perfect it gave you chills because you are about to? Drop a comment, hit that like, and let me take you back to where it all started. But before Route 9, before the rain and the wreck, there was a morning. And like most mornings in Faith Turner's life, it started before the sun did. 4:45 a.m. The alarm didn't go off because Faith never set one. Her body just knew. 20 years of waking up early, first to help her mother open the corner store, then to get through college on a schedule held together with duct tape and stubbornness, and now to check her mother's blood sugar before the day had a chance to go wrong. Gloria Turner sat in her recliner by the window, 71 years old, hands trembling in her lap, the veins on her feet wrapped in gauze that needed changing again. Faith knelt on the carpet, pricked her mother's finger, read the number, drew the insulin, pressed the needle into skin that was running out of places to be pressed. "You're up too early again," Gloria said. "I'm right on time, Mama." Same conversation, every morning. Neither of them believed it. By 6:15, Faith had changed the gauze, made oatmeal, laid out, Gloria's pills in a plastic organizer, Monday through Sunday, twice a day, kissed her mother on the forehead, and walked out into a neighborhood that had given up on itself a long time ago. Riverside Elementary sat at the end of Clifton Avenue like an apology. Cracked walls, a parking lot with more potholes than paint. The air conditioning had stopped working in August and never came back. The library had 200 books. Faith had counted, and 46 of them were missing covers. But every morning at 7:23, kids walked through her classroom door, and every morning Faith stood at that door and said their names. Every single one. Because for some of them, it was the only time an adult said their name without yelling it. She bought markers with her own money, printed worksheets at the gas station down the block because the school printer had been jammed since March. Last week, she brought in a lamp from home because 2 of the ceiling lights had burned out, and the maintenance request she filed in September was still sitting in someone's inbox. No one asked her to do this. No one thanked her either. At 3:30 that afternoon, the email came. Subject line, Riverside Elementary Budget Review and Facility Assessment. Faith read it twice, then a third time. The words didn't change. The district was evaluating options for the school's future. A real estate company, Garrison Holdings, had expressed interest in the land. The school board would vote in 60 days. 60 days. That's all her kids had. At 4:15, the faculty meeting confirmed it. Phyllis Crawford, chair of the school board, 58 blonde hair pulled tight, silk blouse, heels that clicked like a metronome on the tile floor, stood at the front of the room and delivered the news like she was reading a stock report. "This isn't personal," she said. "It's fiscal responsibility." Faith raised her hand. "What happens to the students?" Phyllis looked at her the way you look at a waitress who's asked a question above her pay grade. "They'll be redistributed to neighboring schools." "Redistributed?" Faith repeated. "Like inventory?" The room went quiet. Phyllis smiled, the kind of smile that has teeth but no warmth. "I understand this is emotional for you, Faith, but emotion doesn't balance a budget." Faith drove home that night with both hands on the wheel, jaw tight, eyes straight ahead. She didn't cry. She never cried in the car. That was a rule she made the year her father died, the year she decided that crying was something you did after you fixed the problem, not before. She had 60 days. She didn't have a plan, but she had 23 kids who needed that building to stay standing. Faith stayed at the school until dark. She couldn't go home yet. If she went home, she'd have to sit in that living room with her mother and pretend the world wasn't ending. Gloria would see it on her face. Gloria always saw it, and Faith wasn't ready to lie yet. So she stayed. Graded papers, reorganized the supply shelf, 7 boxes of crayons, 2 of them missing the color green, wiped down desks that smelled like fruit snacks and dry erase markers. The rain had started around 7, soft at first, then harder, until the windows sounded like someone was throwing gravel at them. At 9:12, her phone buzzed. She almost didn't pick it up. She'd been staring at the budget email again, running numbers that didn't add up and never would. But the screen said Mama, and Faith Turner never let that call ring twice. Baby? Gloria's voice was thin, the kind of thin that folds in on itself. The insulin's gone. I thought there was one more in the box, but it's empty. And I feel off. Faith's chest tightened. She could hear it, the slight slur at the edges of her mother's words. Blood sugar climbing, the body starting to negotiate with itself. Mama, sit down. Don't stand up. I'm coming. I am sitting down. I've been sitting down all day. That's all I do, baby. Faith grabbed her keys, her bag, her jacket, ran to the parking lot in the rain. The car started on the 3rd try. It always took 3. She pulled out of the lot and drove east toward the 24-hour pharmacy on Division Street, the only one in a 12-mile radius that stayed open past 8. The rain was brutal now, wipers on high and still not enough. She gripped the wheel at 10 and 2, leaned forward, squinted through the blur. 12 minutes to the pharmacy, 11 if she pushed it. She called Gloria again from the car, no answer. Called again, nothing. A 3rd time, 4 rings, 5, then a click. Mama? I'm here. Quieter now. I just dropped the phone, my hands. I know, Mama. 10 minutes. Keep talking to me. Faith, you don't need to speed. I'm fine. I've had worse. She had. That was the part that broke Faith, not the crisis, but how casual her mother had become with it. How many times a body could almost shut down before the person inside it started treating emergencies like weather. The pharmacy was bright and empty. Faith ran in, hair dripping, blouse see-through from the rain. The pharmacist looked at her like she'd been pulled from a river. She paid with the last $43 in her checking account. Not her savings, because there were no savings, and ran back to the car with the insulin bag pressed against her chest like something alive. Back on the road, Route 9, the fastest way home. The rain had gotten worse. Sheets of water sliding across the road, visibility down to 30 feet. Faith's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. Every red light felt like a betrayal. Then her headlights caught something. A shape on the road, large, dark, metal reflecting in the rain, and next to it, a man, on his knees, both hands on a motorcycle that lay on its side like a dead animal. Faith's foot hovered over the gas. Every instinct told her to keep driving. Her mother was 11 miles away, blood sugar climbing, hands too weak to hold a phone, but the man wasn't moving, and the rain wasn't stopping, and no one else was on this road. She looked in the rearview mirror, then she hit the brakes. She pulled over 20 feet past the wreck, threw the car in park, and left the engine running. The headlights cut 2 white beams through the rain, framing the scene like a stage nobody wanted to be on. The bike was a Harley-Davidson Road King, matte black, chrome pipes. It lay on its left side, front tire shredded down to the rim, the kind of damage you don't ride away from. The man was still on his knees, silver hair flattened to his skull, a leather vest with patches, Hells Angels chapter president, arms covered in old ink. He was big, not gym big, life big, the kind of man gas stations go quiet for. Faith walked toward him, rain soaking through her blouse in seconds, the insulin bag tucked under her arm. Hank heard her footsteps and turned. His eyes went from her face to her shoes and back again. He looked at her the way people look at something that doesn't make sense. You need to keep driving, sweetheart. His voice was gravel-dragged through water. I'm not the kind of man you pull over for. Faith stopped 3 feet from the bike. She looked at the tire, looked at him, then crouched down and examined the rim. You got a patch kit or a spare tube? Hank blinked. "Did you hear what I said?" "I heard you." She didn't look up. "You got a kit or not?" For a moment he just stared. Then he pointed to the saddlebag on the right side. "Side pouch. Should be a tube in there. Tire lever, too." Faith opened the pouch, pulled out the tube, the lever, a small hand pump. She laid them on the wet asphalt in a row, the way a surgeon lays out instruments. Then she went to work. Hank watched her strip the tire from the rim with her bare hands. No gloves, no hesitation. Her fingers moved like they'd done this before, not on a Harley maybe, but on something. Lawn mowers, bicycles, the kind of machines people fix when they can't afford to pay someone else to do it. "Where'd you learn that?" he asked. "My daddy's lawn care business. I've been changing tires since I was 12. The rain hammered them both. Faith's slacks were black with water. Her shoes had given up 10 minutes ago. She worked by the glow of his taillight and her car's headlights, and she didn't complain. Not once. Inside her car, the insulin sat on the passenger seat. 11 miles south, her mother was sitting in a dark living room, hands trembling, waiting. Faith's phone had buzzed twice in the last 4 minutes. She hadn't looked at it. She couldn't think about that right now. If she thought about Gloria, she'd stand up, get in the car, and leave this man on the side of the road. And she couldn't do that. Not because of some grand philosophy about kindness or duty, but because her mother had raised her a certain way. And that way didn't include leaving people on their knees in the rain. So she kept working. Hank didn't say much while she worked. He sat on the guardrail and watched. At one point he tried to stand to help, but his leg buckled. The fall had done something to his knee. He sat back down and let a stranger fix his bike in a storm. That part cost him more than anything. He was Hank Garrison. He'd led a chapter for 19 years. He'd ridden through snowstorms and funeral processions and 2 divorces. He didn't sit while other people worked, especially not a woman half his size. But she hadn't given him a choice. She just knelt down and started. When the tire was seated and the tube held pressure, Faith stood up. Her knees cracked. Her hands were black with grease and road grit. She wiped them on her slacks. They were ruined anyway, and stepped back. "Should hold for 50 miles if you keep it under 40. Hank stood slowly. He looked at her. Really looked. Not at the wet blouse or the ruined shoes. At her. The kind of look that happens when someone does something so ordinary it becomes extraordinary. "What's your name?" "Faith." He nodded. Just once. Then he looked at her license plate, memorized it in 2 seconds the way men like him memorize things, climbed on the Harley and kicked the engine alive. He didn't say thank you. He didn't have the words for it yet. The bike roared north. Faith got back in her car, picked up her phone, 2 missed calls from Gloria, and drove south. But the tire didn't hold. 7 miles north of where Faith had fixed it, the hand pump's seal gave out. The tube lost pressure slowly at first, a soft hiss under the engine noise that Hank didn't catch until the bike started pulling left. He pulled over under an overpass, killed the engine, looked at the tire, and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Helplessness. He pulled out his phone. 3% battery. 1 bar of signal. He had enough juice for 1 call, maybe 2. He dialed the hospital. "St. Mary's Memorial, how may I—" "Room 412. Walt Garrison." "Is he still—" "Sir, I can't disclose patient information over the—" "He's my brother. I'm his emergency contact. Hank Garrison. Check your list." Silence. Typing. Then a nurse's voice, different from the first. Softer. The kind of soft that comes right before bad news. "Mr. Garrison, your brother is stable but declining. The doctor recommends— if you're planning to visit sooner would be better than later." Sooner. That word sat in his stomach like a stone. "How long? I can't say for certain, but if there's something you need to tell him tonight would be a good time." The phone died before he could answer. Hank sat under that overpass and stared at the dead screen. 40 miles between him and room 412. A flat tire. No phone. No signal. Rain coming down so hard the sound filled the concrete tunnel like static. He thought about Walt. The last time they spoke, really spoke, was 14 years ago, Thanksgiving. The argument started over money and ended over everything else. Walt said things. Hank said worse things. Their mother was still alive then, sitting at the head of the table, watching her two sons tear each other apart like strangers. She died the following spring. They stood on opposite sides of her casket and didn't exchange a single word. 14 years, 14 Christmases, 14 birthdays where neither one picked up the phone, and now Walt was in a hospital bed with tubes in his arms and a body that had quit on him, and the only thing Hank needed in this world was to sit beside him and say two words. I'm sorry. Not for Thanksgiving, not for the money, for all of it.
For every year he let pride take up the space where his brother used to be. Headlights again. Hank looked up. A car, the same car. Same headlights. Same woman. Faith Turner pulled under the overpass and stepped out dry this time, at least, for a moment. I saw you from the road, she said. Tire again? Hank shook his head slowly. You should be home by now. I was almost home. Then I saw your bike. She was already kneeling, looking at the tube. The seal on the pump is bad. I've got a bicycle pump in my trunk. It's smaller, but the seal is tighter. Might hold longer. Hank watched her walk to her car, open the trunk, and come back with a hand pump that looked like it belonged to a child. She attached it to the valve and started pumping. Steady, patient, like the rain wasn't even there. Your mother, he said. The insulin, did you... My neighbor brought it over. She's okay. For now. For now. Hank heard the weight in those two words. Why'd you come back? Faith didn't look up. I didn't come back. I was on my way home and saw you on the shoulder. That's not what I asked. She stopped pumping, looked at him. Rain dripping off her chin, her eyelashes, the collar of her jacket. Because no one else was going to, she said. And you looked like a man who needed to be somewhere. That broke something in him. Not loudly, not with tears or trembling, just a quiet crack in the wall he'd spent 62 years building. My brother, he said. And then he told her, Walt, the cancer, the 14 years, the phone that died before he could ask how long. Faith listened. She didn't say, I'm sorry. She didn't say, everything happens for a reason. She pumped the tire, checked the pressure, and when it was done, she stood up and said, You'll make it. Keep it under 35. Hank got on the bike. This time, before he kicked the engine, he looked back. Faith. Yeah. Thank you. 2 words, but from a man like Hank Garrison, they weighed more than most people's speeches. He rode north. She drove south. 2 strangers with the same wounds someone they loved was running out of time heading in opposite directions on the same road. Hank made it to St. Mary's at 11:14 p.m. He parked the Harley in the emergency lane, didn't care about the sign, didn't care about the tow warning, and walked through the sliding doors before the engine finished cooling. A security guard started toward him, saw the vest the size of him, and decided against it. The lobby was the color of exhaustion, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, a janitor pushing a mop in slow circles across linoleum that smelled like bleach and bad news. 2 nurses at the front desk looked up when they heard the boots, heavy, wet, hitting the floor like a man walking into a place he wasn't sure would have him. Walt Garrison, room 412. The older nurse checked her screen. Visiting hours ended at, that's my brother up there, and I need to see him before he dies, so either give me a visitor pass or watch me walk past you. She gave him the pass. The elevator took 45 seconds, felt like 45 minutes. Hank leaned against the back wall, rain still dripping off his vest onto the floor. He caught his reflection in the metal door, silver hair wet, leather tattoos, hands the size of dinner plates. He looked like the kind of man hospitals call security for, but right now, he was just a little brother, that's all. Room 412, end of the hall. The door was open. The light inside was dim, that in-between glow hospitals use when someone is leaving and they want the room to be gentle about it. Walt was smaller than Hank remembered. The cancer had taken everything. The broad shoulders, the thick arms, the voice that used to fill a room like furniture. What was left was a man-shaped outline under a white sheet. Tubes in his arms, oxygen in his nose, a monitor beeping in rhythm with a heart that was running out of reasons to keep going. On the bedside table, a photograph. Two young men beside a motorcycle, both grinning, both sunburned. The Harley was their father's, a 1972 shovelhead they'd rebuilt together the summer Walt turned 20 and Hank turned 16. That was the summer Hank decided he'd ride for the rest of his life, because his brother rode, because everything Hank wanted to be started with the sentence, "Walt did it first." Hank pulled a chair to the bed, sat down, took his brother's hand, cold, thin, the fingers didn't grip back. Walt. His voice cracked on the single syllable. "It's me. I'm here." The monitor beeped, the oxygen hissed, the rain tapped the window like it had followed him inside. I should have called. 14 years ago, the day after Thanksgiving, I should have said I didn't mean it, but I'm stubborn, and I'm proud, and I'm stupid, and I'm sorry, Walt. I'm so sorry. Walt's eyes opened, not all the way, just enough. The gray-blue of them, same shade as Hank's, caught the dim light, and somewhere in that fading gaze there was recognition. His little brother, dripping wet, smelling like gasoline and rain, holding his hand like they were kids again. Walt's fingers moved, a squeeze, barely there, but there. Then the corner of his mouth lifted, not a full smile, just the start of one, the kind that says, "I know, and it's okay. It's been okay for longer than you think." The monitor beeped slower, then it didn't beep at all. Hank didn't let go. He sat in that chair until the sun came up, holding a hand that had gone still, listening to a room that had gone quiet, thinking about a woman on Route 9 who gave him back the one thing he thought he'd lost forever. Time. Faith didn't sleep that night. She got home at 10:40. Gloria was in her recliner, eyes half closed, the insulin drip from Mrs. Henderson's visit still doing its work. The color had come back to her face, her hands had stopped shaking. Faith knelt beside her, checked her blood sugar, 142, stable, changed the gauze on her feet, and pulled the blanket up to her mother's chin. "You're wet," Gloria said without opening her eyes. "It's raining, Mama." "You smell like motor oil." Faith looked at her hands. Black grease in the lines of her palms, under her fingernails ground into the skin. She'd forgotten to wash them. "Long story." "Mm-hmm," Gloria smiled. "You always got long stories, baby." Faith showered, changed, and sat at the kitchen table with the budget email open on her phone. She read it 5 more times. The words didn't change. They never did. She set the alarm for 4:45, but she didn't need it. Morning came the way mornings come when you haven't slept, sudden and too bright. Faith went through the routine. Blood sugar, insulin, oatmeal pills, gauze, kissed her mother, drove to school. She pulled into the Riverside parking lot at 7:32. Something was wrong. She felt it before she saw it, a vibration in the steering wheel, a low rumble that wasn't thunder, wasn't a truck, wasn't anything she'd heard at 7:30 in the morning in this neighborhood. It was deeper, rhythmic, like the road itself was breathing. She parked, stepped out, and then she heard it clearly. Engines, not one, not 10, dozens, coming from the east, growing louder, the sound rolling between the buildings like a wave. The crossing guard, Mrs. Platt, 63. Been working that corner for 11 years, lowered her stop sign and stepped back onto the curb. A mother walking her son to the front door grabbed the boy's arm and pulled him behind her. Then they came around the corner. 180 Harley-Davidsons, in formation, 3 wide, stretching back as far as the eye could follow. Chrome catching the early sun, leather, patches, bandanas, beards, the thunder of 180 engines shaking the windows of every classroom in the building. They pulled into the parking lot, filled it, overflowed into the street. Kickstands went down in a wave, click, 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 like dominoes falling in slow motion. Inside the school, Principal Douglas Webb stood at his office window with a phone in each hand. One was calling 911, the other was ringing the district office. His face was the color of old paper. There are bikers, at least 100, Hell's Angels. They're in the parking lot. I need police here, now." Teachers locked classroom doors.
Children pressed their faces against windows. A first grader started crying. A fifth grader pulled out his phone and started filming. In the front office, the secretary, Mrs. Delgado, was Googling what to do if a motorcycle gang shows up at your school. The results were not helpful. Phyllis Crawford's phone was already blowing up. She was on a conference call with 2 board members, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "I don't care what they want. Get them off school property. This is exactly the kind of thing that proves we need to shut that place down." But outside, something strange was happening. The bikers weren't shouting, weren't circling, weren't revving engines or blocking doors. They were unloading. Pickup trucks had followed the motorcycles, 4 of them, beds stacked with lumber, paint cans, brushes, power tools, boxes of supplies. Men and women in leather vests were carrying 2x4s across the parking lot like it was a construction site. Faith stood at her second-floor window. Her coffee was still warm in her hand. Her heart was pounding, and then she saw him. Hank Garrison, front of the formation, standing beside his road king with his arms crossed. He looked up at the building, scanning the windows until his eyes found hers. He didn't wave, didn't smile. He just nodded, one slow dip of the chin, the kind of nod that means, "I remember, and I'm here." Faith set down her coffee. "He came," she whispered. Then she walked downstairs and opened the front door. The first police car arrived at 7:51. Officer Tate stepped out, hand on his belt, and surveyed the scene. 180 motorcycles, 40-some leather-clad men and women hauling lumber, a principal in the doorway who looked like he'd swallowed a wasp. "Sir," Webb started, "these people are trespassing on school property. I need them removed immediately." Tate looked at the bikers. One of them, a woman with a gray braid down to her waist, was measuring a windowsill with a tape measure. Another was laying a drop cloth along the south wall. A third was unboxing what appeared to be $500 worth of exterior paint. "Are they renovating?" "That's not the point. They don't have permission." Hank walked over. He moved slow, the way men move when they're used to people getting out of the way. He reached into his vest and pulled out a folder, permits, insurance certificates, a signed volunteer liability waiver, and a letter from a licensed general contractor confirming oversight. "Filed everything at 6 this morning," Hank said.
City office opens at 5:30, if you know who to call. Officer Tate looked at the folder, looked at Webb, looked at the woman with the tape measure who was now whistling. "I'm going to sit in my car for a while," Tate said. "Call me if something actually happens." By 9 o'clock, the school was a construction site. Tommy Brooks, 45, road name Wrench, licensed electrician who'd wired half the warehouses in the county, had the main electrical panel open and was replacing fuses that should have been changed a decade ago. He worked quietly, methodically, the way people work when they're doing something they care about. A biker named Dale Cooper, 51, retired carpenter, hands like catcher's mitts, was rebuilding the front steps. The old ones had a crack down in the middle that teachers had been stepping over for 3 years. By 10:30, the crack was gone, and the steps were level for the first time since the building was built. Donna Wilson, 39, tattoo sleeves on both arms, former Army medic, walked into the library with 6 cardboard boxes. 214 books. Brand new. She'd spent her own money. When the librarian, a part-timer named Mrs. Perry, asked why, Donna shrugged and said every kid deserves a book that doesn't smell like someone else's basement. The children didn't know what to make of it. At first, the teachers kept them inside, doors locked, blinds drawn, safety protocol. But kids are smarter than protocols. They peeked through the blinds. They heard the hammers, the drills, the laughter, actual laughter coming from outside. By lunchtime, the 4th graders were pressing their faces against the glass. Faith's student Lily, 9 years old, braids tied with pink ribbons, tugged on Faith's sleeve and asked, "Miss Turner, are the motorcycle people bad?" Faith looked out the window. A biker with a skull tattoo on his neck was building a bookshelf. Another one was painting a wall sunflower yellow, while a third one held the ladder and told him he was doing it wrong. "No, baby, they're not bad." "Then why is everyone scared of them?" Faith paused.
Because sometimes people look at the outside and forget to check the inside. Lily thought about this. Then she poured a cup of water from the classroom sink, walked outside through the side door before Faith could stop her, and handed it to Hank Garrison. He was 6'2". She was 4 nothing. He was holding a circular saw. She was holding a paper cup. He turned off the saw, crouched down, took the cup with both hands the way you hold something fragile, and said, "Thank you, sweetheart." Lily grinned and ran back inside. Hank watched her go. Then he looked at Faith, who was standing in the doorway with her hand over her mouth and tears running down her face. He understood then. Not just why he came, but why did she stop on Route 9? It wasn't about tires or insulin or time. It was about this. The thing that happens when one person decides that another person matters. The chain reaction, the ripple that turns into a wave. By 5 o'clock, the south wall was painted, the electrical system was up to code, the front steps were solid, the library had books with spines that cracked when you opened them, and 23 fourth graders had learned something that wasn't in any textbook. The news vans showed up on day 3. Channel 4 was first, then 7, then 12. By noon, there were 6 cameras in the parking lot and a helicopter circling overhead like it was covering a car chase instead of a school renovation. The story had gone viral overnight. Someone, probably the 5th grader, had posted a video on social media.
30 seconds of 180 Harleys pulling into a school parking lot, filmed through a window with a cracked frame. The caption read, "Bro, what is happening at my school, RN?" 14 million views in 16 hours. Reporters wanted interviews. Hank told them no. The bikers told them no. Faith told them no. But the cameras kept rolling anyway, catching every hammered nail and painted wall from the street. And then Phyllis Crawford arrived. She stepped out of a black Cadillac Escalade at 1:15 p.m., heels clicking on the freshly paved walkway the bikers had laid that morning. She was not alone. Beside her was a man in a gray suit, Gerald Whitmore Sr., acquisitions director at Garrison Holdings. He carried a leather briefcase and the expression of someone who had never been to this part of town and wanted to make sure everyone knew it. Behind them, 2 school board members, both in press shirts, both looking at the bikers the way museum visitors look at modern art, confused, slightly offended, determined to have an opinion. Phyllis walked past the cameras, past the bikers, past the freshly painted south wall, and stopped in front of the main entrance where Faith was standing with Principal Webb. "This has been very touching," Phyllis said. She didn't lower her voice. She wanted the cameras to hear. "But the board's decision is final. The land sale to Garrison Holdings closes in 53 days. Painting walls doesn't change real estate law." Webb opened his mouth. Phyllis cut him off. "I've spoken with the district superintendent this morning. The construction work being done here was not authorized by the board. These individuals," she gestured at the bikers without looking at them, "are not licensed school contractors. I'm filing a cease and desist this afternoon." Gerald Whitmore stepped forward, briefcase open. "The purchase agreement for this parcel was signed in principle 6 weeks ago. Garrison Holdings has already begun environmental assessments. The project timeline—" "Stop." The voice came from behind them, low, calm. The kind of calm that makes people stop talking, not because it's loud, but because it's heavy. Hank Garrison walked through the crowd. He'd been painting window frames on the east side of the building. His flannel was speckled with white paint. His hands were covered in it. He didn't look like a CEO. He didn't look like a billionaire. He looked like a 62-year-old man who'd been doing manual labor for 3 days and hadn't slept more than 4 hours any of those nights. He stopped in front of Gerald Whitmore. "Garrison Holdings," Hank said. "That's your client." Whitmore straightened his tie. "That's correct. And you are—" Hank reached into his back pocket and pulled out a business card. It was bent, paint-stained. He handed it to Whitmore. Whitmore read it, then read it again. The color left his face like someone had pulled a plug. "Henry Garrison III," Hank said. "Founder and sole owner of Garrison Holdings. That's my company you're representing, and I don't remember hiring you to buy a school." The parking lot went silent. Not quiet silent,
the kind of silence that happens when reality shifts under everyone's feet at the same time. Phyllis Crawford's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Whitmore stammered, "Sir, Mr. Garrison, the board approached us. The proposal was submitted through standard channels. We assumed—" "You assumed." Hank let the words sit. "Well, here's what's not an assumption. I'm canceling the land acquisition effective immediately. Garrison Holdings will not be purchasing this property. Not today, not in 53 days, not ever." He turned to the cameras, all 6 of them, red lights on.
"And I'm donating $2 million to Riverside Elementary for infrastructure, teacher salaries, after-school programs, and a full-ride college scholarship fund." The reporters erupted. Phyllis took a step back like she'd been shoved, but Hank wasn't done. He turned to Faith. "3 nights ago, this woman was driving home to save her mother's life. Her mother is diabetic. She needed insulin. The pharmacy was 20 minutes away and the clock was running." He paused. "I was on the same road. My motorcycle was down. I was trying to get to a hospital 40 miles north because my brother was dying and I hadn't spoken to him in 14 years. The parking lot was so quiet you could hear the flag on the school roof snapping in the wind. She stopped, in the rain, on the side of the road. She got on her knees and fixed my tire with her bare hands. She did it knowing her mother was waiting. She did it knowing every minute she gave me was a minute she was taking from someone she loved." His voice broke. He didn't try to hide it. "I made it to that hospital. I held my brother's hand. I told him I was sorry, and he heard me. He smiled, and then he was gone." Hank looked at Faith. "If she hadn't stopped, I would have spent the rest of my life carrying that. She gave me the chance to say goodbye. That's not something you repay, but you try." He reached into the folder he'd been carrying all week and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "This scholarship fund is named after her mother. It's called the Gloria Turner Scholarship, because women like Gloria Turner raise daughters who stop in the rain for strangers, and that's the kind of thing worth building a future on." Faith couldn't speak. She pressed both hands over her mouth, and the tears came hard fast, the kind she never allowed herself, not in the car, not at school, not in front of anyone. But here now, surrounded by bikers and cameras and children pressing their faces against the windows she broke, and for the first time in her life, breaking felt like the right thing to do. The crowd didn't move for a long time. Reporters held their microphones in the air, forgetting to ask questions. Bikers stood with their arms at their sides, watching. The children in the windows were pressed so close to the glass, their breath fogged it. Phyllis Crawford was the first to leave. She walked back to her Escalade without a word. Gerald Whitmore followed, briefcase closed, phone already at his ear. The 2 board members lingered for a moment, looked at each other, and then walked away like men leaving a building they'd just been fired from. No one stopped them. No one needed to. The cameras had already done the work. Principal Webb stood on the new front steps, the ones Dale Cooper had rebuilt that morning, and shook Hank's hand. It was a long handshake. The kind where both people hold on a beat longer than necessary because something is being transferred that doesn't have a word yet. "Thank you," Webb said. "I don't know what else to say." "Don't say anything," Hank said. "Just keep the doors open." Faith hadn't moved from the entrance. Her hands were still over her mouth. Her eyes were red and swollen, and she didn't care. For the first time in years, she didn't care who saw her cry. Hank walked over. He stood in front of her, this enormous man in a paint-speckled flannel and a leather vest, and he didn't say a word. He just reached out and put his hand on her shoulder. Gently. "The way you touch something you're afraid of breaking." "Your mama raised a good one," he said. Faith laughed through the tears. "You don't even know my mama." "I'd like to, if she's willing." 2 hours later, a car pulled into the school parking lot. Mrs. Henderson was driving. Gloria Turner was in the passenger seat, wrapped in a cardigan, confused, squinting through the windshield at the motorcycles and the cameras, and the freshly painted building that used to be falling apart. Faith wheeled her mother through the front door in a borrowed wheelchair. Gloria looked at the new walls, the new lights, the books in the library, the mural the children had started painting on the east hallway, handprints in every color, overlapping, reaching upward. Then Faith wheeled her to the front of the building, where a temporary banner hung over the entrance.
The Gloria Turner Scholarship Fund. Gloria read it 3 times. Her lips moved with each word. What is this? Faith knelt beside her, took her mother's hands, the trembling, gauze-wrapped hands that had held her as a baby, had braided her hair, had packed her lunch every day of elementary school, had worked 3 jobs to put her through college. It's because of you, Mama. Everything I did that night, stopping in the rain, helping a stranger, I did it because you taught me to. Gloria looked at her daughter, then at the banner, then at the enormous man in the leather vest standing 10 feet away, watching them with eyes that were red and wet and not ashamed of it. You the biker? Gloria asked. Hank nodded. Gloria studied him for a long moment, then she said, You look like you could use a meal. Come by the house Sunday, I'll make a pot roast. The bikers closest to them heard it and started laughing. Then more of them laughed, then the teachers, then the kids, and for one long, unlikely, impossible moment, a school that had been earmarked for demolition sounded like the happiest place in the world. Lily, 9 years old, pink ribbons in her braids, walked up to the east wall with a can of spray paint she'd borrowed from a biker named Dale.
She didn't ask permission. She just painted something small in the corner of the mural down low where only someone her height would notice it. A motorcycle. And a woman standing in the rain. 6 months later, Riverside Elementary was unrecognizable. The walls were solid. The roof didn't leak. The library had 600 books. Donna Wilson kept bringing more every month, and at some point the school stopped counting and started building new shelves. The electrical system ran clean for the first time in a decade. The air conditioning worked. The playground had equipment that wasn't held together with zip ties and prayers. But that wasn't the part people talked about. What people talked about was the Saturday program. Every Saturday morning at 9, a line of Harleys pulled into the parking lot. Tommy Wrench taught the kids basic electrical wiring, how to fix a lamp, how to replace a switch, how circuits work. Dale Cooper ran a woodworking station in the gymnasium, where 10-year-olds built birdhouses and learned to measure twice. Donna Wilson started a reading circle that somehow became the most popular after-school activity in the building, beating out basketball, which no one thought was possible. They weren't tutors. They weren't volunteers in matching t-shirts. They were bikers who showed up because a woman once knelt in the rain for a stranger, and the stranger never forgot it. The Gloria Turner Scholarship awarded its first 15 grants in the spring. Full ride, books, tuition, housing, no essays required. The only question on the application was, tell us about a time someone helped you when they didn't have to. Gloria Turner was there for the ceremony. She sat in the front row in her wheelchair cardigan buttoned to the collar, hands steady for once. When they read the scholarship name, she turned to Faith and said, I still don't understand why they named it after me. I didn't do anything. Faith squeezed her mother's hand. That's exactly why, Mama. Hank rode out to the cemetery every first Sunday of the month. He'd park the Harley beside the iron fence walk to Walt's headstone and sit in the grass. Sometimes he talked. Told Walt about the kids, about the school, about the girl with the pink ribbons who called him Mr. Hank, and asked if she could ride his motorcycle when she turned 16. Sometimes he just sat. On the headstone beneath Walt's name and dates, Hank had added one line. He smiled, and it was enough. Faith never gave a single interview. Reporters called for weeks. Morning shows sent invitations. A publisher asked about a book deal. She turned them all down. When a journalist from the local paper finally caught her after school and asked why she stopped that night on Route 9, she said the same thing she always said. I just fixed a flat tire. But that's never really what it was, and everyone who was there that day, every biker, every teacher, every kid who pressed their face to the glass, they knew it. Sometimes the biggest thing a person can do is the smallest thing, and sometimes the smallest thing changes everything. I'll be honest, I didn't want to tell this story. I thought I knew how it ended. The rich guy writes a check, everyone claps, the credits roll. But that's not what happened here. What happened here is a woman chose someone else's emergency over her own.
And a man who hadn't cried in 14 years broke open in a hospital room because she gave him 10 minutes he didn't deserve. That's not a feel-good story. That's the kind of thing that makes you look in the mirror and ask what you would have done. And if you're being honest, you're not sure. Neither am I.
If this story made you feel something, drop a comment. What would you have done on Route 9 that night? Would you have stopped? Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Because stories like this one don't come around often. And when they do, they deserve to be heard.
I'll be honest, I thought I knew how this story ended. Rich guy writes a check, everyone claps, credits roll, but that's not what happened here. What happened here is something I can't stop thinking about. Faith had every reason to keep driving. Her mother was 11 miles away, blood sugar climbing, hands too weak to hold a phone. The clock was running, and she still knelt on wet asphalt and faced a stranger's tire with her bare hands. One choice, 10 minutes, and look what it built. 23 kids kept their school. 15 students got full ride scholarships, and a man got to hold his dying brother's hand and say the only two words that mattered: "I'm sorry." That's the thing about kindness no one tells you. You never just save one person, you save every person that person was going to reach. So here's what keeps me up at night. Road 9, pouring rain, a stranger on his knees. Your mother is waiting. The clock is ticking. What do? Because the truth is, we all want to believe we'll stop. But would you give someone 10 minutes if those 10 minutes might cost you everything? That's the real question, isn't it? Drop a comment. Would you have stopped? Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe, because stories like this don't come around often. And remember, sometimes the smallest thing a people can do is the biggest thing they would ever do.